Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have Kevin Hancock, who is the author of this beautiful book, The Seventh Power, One CEO's Journey into the Business of Shared Leadership. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you.
In that first segment, we were talking about how your spasmodic dysphonia actually left you to a point where you couldn't speak as much, and that it's something that it sounds like it's still part of your lived experience, and that journey brought you to a place of I would say healing, maybe in Pine Ridge, where you're working with the Lakota people. And as part of that, in the first segment, we were talking about the power of giving individuals a voice. And you just a beautiful example of how you did that in your corporation with COVID and bringing people back to work. And then at the tail end, you were talking about how it's about giving people power and trust versus taking power and trust, and the importance of individual power. And so I wanted to talk about the individual power as it relates to the seventh power. And you also said something about being disconnected with nature, and I want to go back to that because I think that's a very important point. So that was a very long intro, but can you first tell
Lovely.
us about the seventh power and what it is?
Yeah, so thank you. It's a concept I learned about at Pine Ridge while I was on the reservation, and it connects to their most sacred symbol, the medicine wheel. So the medicine wheel honors the six great powers: the West, North, East, South, Sky, and Earth. But I had a gentleman show me one day that at the very center of the wheel, at the axis of north, south, and west, east, that those who knew the old ways of the Sioux know that a seventh power also exists.
Yeah.
And it gave me chill. I just got a chill to even say it. That seventh power is you. It
Hmm.
is me. It is all of us. It's the individual human spirit. And while the world around us is filled with magic and mystery and powers that pull and tug on us, the seventh power is the recognition that we too are
Hmm.
one of those powers, and that
Hmm.
within us is something sacred, holy, and powerful, and that our choices and our actions reverberate back into the world. We don't just
Hmm.
take power from away being exerted on us, that we all are innately powerful beings.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's what the seventh power title, that's where it comes from. And the idea is really about putting that seventh power back front and center in human society, human organizations, and including within a business, that you lead through everyone's ability to lead and contribute and have a voice.
Hmm. So everyone has a ability to lead and contribute, which is so huge because I think a lot of us don't feel like we do. We don't feel like we can lead and contribute and have a voice, and mostly because most corporations don't have that. So how do you even start? So when you said the seventh power, I actually started almost like welling up in tears, and I'm not even sure why, but there's something really powerful because I think all of us feel, especially now with the current crisis, feel sort of powerless. And so how do you go about drawing through and, as you call it, self-actualize?
Right.
How do you work with an employee to do that? Let's say, like, yes, I buy what that guy Kevin is thinking. Give us a couple of initial steps. Where do you start?
Yeah, you really start by making the individual human spirit the priority. Once you make that leap, the rest of it is just simple and easy and intuitive. Really, it
Yeah.
starts with that. We've lived through centuries of what I believe uh, is an empire-centric way of viewing the world. The individuals served the center, the empire,
Mm-hmm.
and we were indoctrinated to think this way and
Mm-hmm.
to act this way. So flipping that script is not a simple exercise because it runs counter to kind of how we've all been um, trained, if you will, in a really subtle way. So it starts with the awareness that we want to move in a different direction.
Right.
It takes leaders who see the power of moving in that other direction. And once you see it, though, and make that leap, it gets really, really simple. It's essentially about creating safe communities where everyone feels they can be their authentic self without repercussions, and where they can say what they actually think. It's led me, CJ, to this, to what is now my favorite question to contemplate, and it's this: what if everybody on Earth felt trusted, respected, valued, and heard?
Mm-hmm.
What might change?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Right. I believe everything would change.
I believe with you too. It's interesting because I'm mapping it to a slightly different ideology, but similar. I mean, it's similar ideology, different context. So I'm working with a Buddhist teacher who is really into attachment parenting. And attachment parenting is that when in our early childhood, we aren't necessarily seen, valued, attuned to. So very similar to your words of trusted, respected, and heard. Just similar, different words for the same kind of idea. And then when that doesn't happen, we don't have a sense of safety, a sense of grounding, if in our environments. And when that doesn't happen, it's hard for us to flourish and grow, right? Because most of our energy and resources are spent trying to protect ourselves from some imminent danger that's out there versus like being in the center of the seven dimensions and being in the center of everything. We're kind of off center all the time, chasing, what is the latest thing that Fauci is saying on COVID? How about this other, we're just like spinning all around in different directions. But I think everything would change if we just tuned into our center. But so when you're talking to someone a new employee that had been working
Mm-hmm.
at some gigantic company in which they were never heard, thought, listened to, understood, or respected. And that must be very weird for them to be like, hey, so what do you think about this? Or like, what do you mean? What do you want me to do? And they're like, well, what do you think about this? I don't think about anything. Tell me what to do. Like there's this kind of, I've noticed that there's a generational difference because I notice that people, this ideology that you're talking about, they have been trying to implement at the National Park Service. And so I've worked with superintendents who have worked with people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So if you ask a 50, 60, and 70-year-old, what do you like? What do you want? You're like, I don't know, just tell me what to do. And you're like, no, I really want to know what you want. They're like, I don't know what I want. But if you ask a 20, 30, and 40-year-old, they're like,
Yes.
yes, here's all the things I want. Like, I'm having a hard time at home. And, can you make my chair feel more comfortable? Like, they're much more expressive. So how do you work with these two different kinds of population of people?
Right. That's such a great thought and point, and I think this is the social challenge and opportunity of our time. It's shifting from that old approach to this new one, but it requires not just a change in leadership, but as you point out, a change in followership.
Yeah.
Followership has one big advantage: when things go wrong,
Right.
it's someone else's responsibility.
Ah.
So there is a bit of a scary initial leap here that everyone has to take to begin to trust their own seventh power. Now, leaders can do a lot to facilitate this. So I believe specifically the transition that leaders have to make is from what I've come to define as overreaching to restraint. So overreaching takes many forms, but it's essentially going too far, taking your position of power and overusing it. And what's necessary today is the opposite, which is having power like a CEO does, but not always using it. So I stumbled on this at first because of my voice. People would come ask me a question at work, and early on I couldn't give an answer. Really, I couldn't say more than a sentence or two at a time. So what I started doing was answering a question with a question. I would say back to people at work, that is a great question. What do you think we should do about it? And initially, I was just protecting my voice by putting the conversation back on you. But what struck me over time, CJ, was so magical. People already knew what to do. They didn't actually need a top-down directive from someone else. They knew what to do. All they really needed was the confidence and the encouragement and the safety and the orientation to use their own voice. So it's really about transitioning from looking externally to internally. And this COVID-19 period is a great example. And it's a wake-up call opportunity. So today, if one was not awake and alert, one might turn on the TV to decide how I should feel. Right? That's really giving up your power. That's having someone else tell you whether today you should feel a little more scared or a little less.
That's
and we're all caught in it, and we've got to take that back. So yeah, we got to watch the news once in a while because we want to be aware.
Yeah.
But it's very different to be aware than to surrender your energy and your control and your plan to others, which I think has been happening for quite some time on planet Earth in very, very subtle ways. So this is really about humans taking back their power in the lovely sense, not in the, not in the traditional revolution is we'll bloody those in power, and then we'll take someone else and put them in the same castle on the hill and end up with the same systems. Right. This is about really thinking fundamentally about where power resides and looking inward to find it.
I love that idea. I think that I'll just make one note before we close, because I one of the things that's just been so alarming and worrisome to me and promising, like all those three things, is that there's not, and I don't even know at this point when Maslow's hierarchy of needs come in, I don't really know if this is still going to be the issue, but diversity, equity, and inclusion has been like a big push in a lot of corporations with people not really knowing what it means. And what's been interesting is the current interpretation is usurping power, taking, no offense, the white men and like having like an African woman, and it's like, wait, so you're basically just swapping roles. How is now you're making a white man feel bad? Like, I don't think that was this is not, it's like you're just switching roles. I don't think that this was the intent. It's about sharing power, not switching seats. It's one of the most
Yeah,
disturbing things too that I'm seeing with today's society of understanding about power.
yeah. And I think a simple way to think about that, the paradigm shift to me is the old model was that power was finite.
Hmm.
So, like, right, there's only this much. And if anyone has a piece of it, that means I have less of it. The new model, which is really aligning with the energy of the universe, its power is
Infinite,
infinite.
yeah.
And in fact, the opposite happens. The more you come into your power, the more you release others
Mm.
to come in to theirs. And when we
Mm.
start thinking about power differently, and not just financial, not to diminish financial issues and equity. I'm not diminishing that, but what I'm saying is it's not just that. It's respect for individuals. That's the big ingredient, and it's life's not just about money. Money matters. It'll always matter, but it's not just about money. It's about an internal sense of um, richness
Mm.
that, that that we all know is bigger than material things.
Mm. Mm. I love it. We've been talking to Kevin Hancock. Please hold up your beautiful book. We've been talking about Kevin Hancock about his book, The Seventh Power, one CEO's journey into shared leadership. So we're in the next segment. What I wanted to do is maybe ask you a little bit about how you get to someone, maybe the questions that cultivate someone's higher calling and what that even means in a work context. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, 42, 48. Hold on. Okay, 3, 2, 1. It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.